Hi everybody, and welcome to another Social Blueprint interview with people in a community who you may or may not know, but everybody does have a story. And today I am sure you will take something away from today's story about how to connect and how to stay healthy. But before we get to today's interview, I just want to say, sign up to the Social Blueprint, go to our website. We have the largest events calendar in Melbourne. There's so many resources there, so many activities that I promise you, you will be blown away. Sign up. But now, on to today's discussion with Trevor Cohen AM, and we're going to discuss all about connection and health span, Trevor, because Trevor, you are certainly ahead of your time. In fact, I was listening to a podcast just this morning with a fellow, Peter Attia. Hi, Peter, who talks all about it, but you're way ahead of him. And with that, Trevor, welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, Trevor, as I said, maybe take us back. You were always into physical fitness, is that right?
I'd say so, yes.
Maybe just tell us, how did that happen?
As a young kid, I had an older brother.
Right.
Who enjoyed a fight. He always loved belting me up. And my father thought he used to say, if I was looking a bit bloodied or whatever, it'll toughen him up. I don't know why he thought I needed toughening up. I had very curly blonde hair.
Right.
And he probably thought I looked a bit of a sissy.
Okay.
So I guess that was one of the reasons why I'm not a bad runner, because very early I could outrun my older brother, and I needed to. My sister, who's still around, Natalie, she often talks about the fact that she could see Daryl throwing me into the wall.
Okay.
And it was this sort of thing would go on, and I wasn't really into it.
Okay.
I didn't enjoy being belted up. But anyway, that's maybe early on. The other thing, I never ever smoked.
Right.
And it was very rare in those days for someone to not smoke. There was a funny story. I was offered a cigarette by one of the Heaney brothers who lived round the corner. Actually, Isaac Heaney, who's a famous footballer today, it was the grandfather of one of these boys. Anyway, I said, "Oh, no, thanks, I don't smoke." Oh, and he was about maybe a few months older than me.
Right.
And he said, "Oh, you're very wise. I gave it up once too." And he was about 13 or 14 at the time. So I told that story and the family thought that was hilarious. But I came from a family that none of us smoked. I don't think, my dad used to. And I remember when I was about 14 and he was having a cigarette and he was a bit jumpy. Yep. And I said, "Why are you doing that? Why are you smoking?" And I remember so clearly he threw the cigarette into the bin, and that was the last time he ever smoked.
Wow.
He said, "You're right." It was pretty cold. He did it cold, and he'd smoked up till that time. Well, he would have been probably he was about 30 years older than me, 45. So there you go. And he lived to 95.
Wow. Well, that's a lesson in also willpower and how to change a habit quickly.
That's right. Yeah. So that's the start.
Excellent.
Go on.
And Trevor, you were saying that your brother, he had a habit of chasing you around, and bashing you up, but just to show, it doesn't all end that way, because you worked with your brother too, didn't you, in a law firm?
We did more than work. We were the best of friends. I mean,
So it doesn't have to end badly.
I was like his private property. If anybody else wanted to have a fight with me, he'd kill him.
Okay.
He was built stocky. We were a bit different in our build. He was also very, very intense.
Right.
He was an extraordinary character. Unbelievable energy, my brother had. And he was always thinking, he was very into the Jewish community, being particularly sport.
Right.
And it was he that started the Ajax Football Club.
Right.
and we played 100 games together, even though it didn't start until we were, I was 20, I think, or when it was finally formed.
Really?
We used to
Okay.
play the North-South matches. Have you heard of those? North of the Yarra played south of the Yarra.
Okay.
And that went on for years. I think that started even before the Second World War. I'm pretty sure it did. And
So you're one of the original. So for all the kids that are at Princess Park today,
Yeah.
it's because of you.
yeah, well, yeah, I went with him actually to the very first. He took me along for a bit of moral support, I think, but he suggested that the Ajax
Right.
at that time, and Basil Isaacs was the president, and he said, why don't we have a Jewish football club?
Right.
And there were arguments against it, it's caused anti-Semitism, it'll be this and that, you're playing on a Saturday. Anyway, he was sent away to do a lot of work, and he
Okay.
spent 12 months schmoozing the secretary of the Victorian Amateur Athletic Association, and eventually he went on to become the coach of the century.
Wow.
He was a good footballer too. We both played a pretty good game, and we both had 100 games with Ajax, but he was an extraordinary coach.
And that was around
Because of
19
his energy and
Right.
passion, and he'd yell. And some of the guys they played under him, so he used to put his face into them, and he'd say, "You're playing for the Jewish people." And when he said "people," the spray would go all over them.
And this was, as you said, in the early 1960s?
Pardon?
Approximately the early 1960s?
This was in the 50s. This was it, but the first team was in 57.
Okay, so now I'm curious about, you came direct.
Well, but before this,
Right.
Darryl had gone into weightlifting. You knew he was an Australian, and we both, when I was 20, and he was a few years older, we both won the Australian weightlifting championship that year.
Wow.
And because I was under 21, I was in a competition. Well, I was given a trophy as the best junior weightlifter in Australia,
Wow.
which was a pretty nice thing. And I was actually chosen for the Maccabi Games, which I didn't like. There were only, in those days, they picked 10
Wow.
or 12 or something. And they'd be a feature on each one each week in the Jewish paper. But I'd promised a guy that I'd go overseas with him, a friend from school. We'd done it. I'd been with him on a trip to Singapore after we finished school.
Right.
With a Chinese boy asked us to come and stay with them, and we had a fantastic time. And we always said, he started law but didn't go on with it, and he waited, and I felt, he wanted to go, and so we went away for 9 months in 1961, which was the year of the Maccabi Games.
Wow.
And I didn't go, and then I was chosen the following 4 years later, and I was in a law practice, and I couldn't. Darryl and I, as you say, plus our wives, were all lawyers.
Oh, so your wives were lawyers.
Yeah.
And so did all four of you work together?
Yeah, we worked together for a few years.
Four lawyers in the same place?
Well, it
same
it was a big thing. That I'm not sure. I think one of my uncles must have alerted the newspapers, because on the front page of all the daily newspapers the next day, there was this big photo of the four of us.
Wow.
Darryl and I in robes, because we moved their admission. This was the day that Hannah and Heather was younger, but Hannah started her articles,
Right.
but became pregnant with Karen and her first daughter, and then had 3 more in quick succession. But by the time Heather had been admitted, or was ready to be admitted, she was ready to go again, you see.
Wow.
So we admitted them together, and it was quite a big thing. And the headlines in the paper were sisters-in-law become sisters-in-law.
Okay.
And Heather came from Shepparton,
Okay.
And someone sent us down the headline from the newspaper in Shepparton, and it was said, "What a coincidence!" C-O-H-E-N.
Definitely.
Anyway, that's a bit of trivia.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I'm curious, just going back, what I was going to ask previously is, so broadly speaking, there were two large waves of Jewish people, the post-Holocaust and the people that were here before. Now, your family was here from the 1870s, is that correct?
1840.
1840s.
I published a book during COVID,
That's right.
and on the front of the book is a picture, is a painting which I happened to get a lithograph. It's actually a lithograph which is so rare, it's very hard to find, but we've used it as the cover for the book. And it's the corner of Collins and Elizabeth Street.
Okay.
The north, and it faces towards the northeast corner, and
Right.
particularly faces to, and that was the corner where my great-great-grandparents occupied the first brick building. Now, whether it was the first, I think it was the first three-store or substantial, because they had brick cells and that,
Right.
which were
Crazy.
whether you classify those as buildings. But this was the first multiple-story brick building in Melbourne, built in 1840, and the first tenant was my great-great-grandfather, who'd come from Sydney in 1842, and he signed the lease. He actually signed the lease there, went back and picked up his
Right.
my great-great-grandmother, who actually came earlier. She was in Melbourne in Sydney from 1833.
Wow.
And she'd followed out she and her parents had followed the two of her stepbrothers, they were, who were sent as convicts, teenage convicts, when they were like so young, and they went through the worst of the convict system, and yet they were huge successes. One of them was actually one of Mary MacKillop's supporters.
Wow.
Acknowledged in her biography, and he started he was the founder of the Adelaide Hebrew congregation.
Wow.
And South Australia is just riddled. He is such a, and this is a fellow who he received the cat of nine tails trying to escape. It was so bad where they were sent to. The absolute worst of the convict system.
Wow.
Anyway, I've gone off the track.
No, what I was curious about.
I'm drifting, but
no.
So when I was during COVID, I know it was a terrible time for many, but for myself, it was an opportunity, because we were stuck down at Mount Eliza, where we have a holiday home.
Right.
And I said to Heather, I'm not watching any more television. I've had this story in my head.
Right.
I went home, I got a few books and articles that I'd written. I sat down and I wrote the book in about probably 4 or 5 weeks.
It's very quick.
The base of the book.
Okay.
And I showed it to my good friend Geoffrey Blaney, who we've known forever, and he said, "That's great." He said, it needs more work. He said, and told me go back to it, which I did.
Right.
And eventually we ended up publishing that. And that's when I had my knee repaired, because I couldn't play tennis anymore because my knee got so bad. And I went and saw a doctor, and he says, "Oh, it's bone on bone." He said, "You should have it fixed." He says, "Your left knee is perfect. It'll last you another 40 years. I said, "Well, that should see me out." And so that was, so he did that, and I was very lucky, because I think they just brought in the robot not that long before to do it. And of course, the kneecap is perfectly sized, and
I want to talk
a
about
great
that.
result.
I'm going to talk to you about the knee, but before that, what I was curious is, did you feel that the post-Holocaust, the big migration here, having sport, you said that you started the first Jewish football team. Was that a place to bring people together?
Oh, I don't know whether that was in my...
Maybe a result wasn't your thinking, but it didn't happen.
Well, I think in my brother's mind, what he was doing, he was playing football for Melbourne University Blues.
Okay.
He played a couple of games, a few games with collegians, and he thought, what am I doing? He says, you know, because we used to have these north-south matches.
Right.
And we'd practice, we'd go on a Sunday and we'd play with the guys, and it was such camaraderie.
Right.
And not that, I mean, we had good, both of us have friends, and I've still got friends from Wesley. They're going every day. There's another one seems to be going, but it's the same with the non-Jewish, obviously. But it was. He just said, look, we practiced for so long,
right,
and there's so much talent there, and we didn't get all the talent. Unfortunately, there were quite a few guys who were playing in A grade, and they didn't want to come down to E grade. So we had to work our way up, and by the time we got up to, you know, C or B, these guys were too old anyway. So we didn't get them. But we started. Today we're really getting them, and Ajax is really looking an amazing side. But it's a brilliant thing because it's probably the biggest club in the whole of Maccabi. I think, I don't know how it compares with basketball, but they're
hard to tell you.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah,
it's huge. It's huge because afterwards they formed the junior association, and the juniors started. You know, they're playing from the age of, I don't know, 9, 10, 8.
Under 9s.
Yeah, that's right, and they're developing, you know, great talent.
And in addition to great talent, they friendships.
And friendships. That's and also good for the community, because, you know, the girlfriends come down and watch, and then they may have parties, and I'm sure there's been lots of Ajax. Well, I know there's been good results.
Yes, no, definitely. And Trevor, I'm curious, most people reach a spot, as you said before, where they stop playing, but you've never stopped exercising or training, have you?
Never. And I think the main thing that's probably kept me fit all these years, I love tennis.
Right.
I've always played tennis, and I had a court for so many years, and I think I could have been quite a good tennis player if I'd been, you know, taken proper coaching.
Right.
But I never did. But I've always relied on my speed, and I've got very good reflex.
Right.
I'm told by many times that
Hand-eye coordination.
And I've been able to return serves from top players we've known that have come down to our place and play tennis, and years later, like my son was friendly with guys. He was very involved with North Melbourne back in the the turn of the century, when they had some of those brilliant footballers.
Okay.
And they were not bad tennis players either. They used to come down. Look,
there's a Jewish kid there now playing that's doing pretty well.
Played with my grandchildren, you know, and I can keep most of them. I can keep them going pretty well. I can return this. They serve hard because of my reflex. I'm able to see the ball and get to it, and my speed, just fast. I can run around, and I think that's kept me fit. Yeah, that and
the love of exercise, you've just always, it's never stopped, has it?
Well, I've always used to walk, even with my wife, who used to be terrific. I mean, we used, at one stage there, we were walking fast walking from Robertson Street, which is a fair way from the Tan. We used to walk Robert Street to the Tan and round and back. So that was a long way. I don't recommend that sort of. As I've got older,
Right.
I've realised that my own view is that running, and I've noticed myself, since I've started exercising for running, which you only do, the longest run I'll ever do is 400 metres.
Right.
And that's not a knee jarring exercise. It's an exercise in getting your lungs moving and so forth. And I don't even run more than once a week. At the moment, I've finally got my legs right.
Yeah.
As far as the
Your knee, you were saying.
as far as when they put a new knee in,
Right.
they cut all the ligaments. He explained to me they cut everything because otherwise they can't put it in. The ligaments and the hamstrings and everything join
Right.
naturally as with time and mild exercise. But he says if you want to run at full speed, that's a different story.
Right.
You've got to strengthen the muscles in the leg around them,
Right.
around them, and that's what the exercises I was put on by the physio that he at where he is at Victoria House, and he also, and then I didn't have a very good lead up to the World Games because my hamstring went in January when I was, and it was during during the break. He was away, and when I got to see him, he says, "Oh God, how long have we got to go?" And it was about 6 weeks till the Victorian Championships, and he said, "Look, I don't know." And then the others were straight after. The World Games was like a week later, and then the Australian Championships was a week later again. It was all in a very short period.
Yeah, and just to let the viewers know, you not only exercise, you still compete globally, don't you?
What's that?
You still compete in races.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, when I heard that we had these guts, initially I went to Sweden last year.
Right.
In August, and that was a disaster because I ran the first race 60. Was it the first race or the second? No, I ran it was 100 metres, and I got into the final. At about half, I was doing well. I was up near the front. My hamstring went, and I limped to the end, and I couldn't believe it. They put me up. My time crossed. They ran out to help me. I was in agony, and they bound me up. But I crossed the line, and they showed, the winner was 17 seconds or 50, whatever, and I'm 32 seconds. So, or whatever it was that took me to limp over the line. I shouldn't have gone to the line. But anyway, after that, we didn't stay. We went away. I couldn't run. Took me about a week to recover properly. Although I was okay. We went on we actually had a nice holiday with my wife and my daughter nearby. But that's when I went back and saw the doctor, Freilich, and he said what I had to do.
Right.
But then I started to do it, and I trained for 6 months, and we thought we were right, and then I felt this. Have I droffled? Or was this making any sense?
Yeah, no, I keep going.
And so I then had this further pull, and he gave me blood plasma. They take blood out,
and put it in.
And he gave me one lot of that. And he says, "Look, come back in 2 weeks. We'll see how it looks, and we'll give you another one." Went back in 2 weeks, and he took the plasma, and I went back to put it in, and he puts up the X-ray. He says, "You've recovered." He says, "I can't believe it." He says, "This is just not normal." So he says, "Well, I've got this tube. I'll put a few drops in." He says, "It's a shame to totally waste it."
And do you still love the competition even after all these years?
Oh, I love it. It's I've never done running.
Right.
I've never done running. I played football. I played tennis. Well, they're probably, and I did weightlifting, which,
Right.
and I used to do a bit of. I'm still very, for my
Yeah.
size.
You look incredibly fit.
I'm
Yeah.
very strong,
Right.
and it's never lost. If you do weightlifting as a sport, providing you don't injure yourself,
Yes. It's like having
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, because you're actually strengthening. What the problem with a lot of people,
Right.
they go to the gym, and I see that they have trainers.
Right.
I'll get killed for this, but but they pay a lot of money
Right.
to trainers who are bodybuilders. They got, you know, they're big,
Right.
but this is not what people need or want, I'm sure,
Right.
because that bodybuilding,
Right.
unless you keep it up, it turns into just mush.
Right.
But if you do weightlifting, which is maybe maximum 6-7 repetitions
Right.
of a weight at as much as you can manage, then that will build muscle, which will last.
And do you still do exercise like that to this day?
And I do that till I wouldn't do. I know I build up, but I do. I went the other day. I was single leg press,
Right.
and I was pressing 90 kilos with one leg.
90 kilos.
90 kilos.
Now, let me tell you, folks, there's no way that you weigh 90 kilos. But yes, exactly. That's insane.
So I've only. What's happened in the last since I've been doing this training,
Right.
I used to weigh consistently 60 k's
Right.
before.
Wow.
I'm now weighing about 62 and a half.
Right.
So I've put on
Some
2.5 k's of
muscle.
muscle, and I've actually probably dropped. But I never carried a lot of weight, but
Right.
maybe half a k of mush.
Wow.
So,
That is
and I'm
inspirational.
feeling so much better. I'm sleeping better.
Wow.
I sleep. I always used to have trouble sleeping. Now I go to bed. I've tried to go to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and wake up about 7. And I've got one of these watches.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got your 8 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing I do now is my week. It's planned out.
Right.
Today I'll go for a swim.
Right.
Swim for half an hour with goggles and snorkel up and down the pool very quietly, and that's
Right.
my day. Tomorrow I'll go for a run. I'll probably run about 1,000 metres overall, but
Right.
short runs of 100.
Right. In
Quite
spirit, in
a
sprints.
vigorous warm up, lasting maybe 20, 15 minutes, and then short runs, 100, then 200s to finish.
Trevor, what you're describing, and you found it out on your own, is what in so many of the longevity and health podcasts that are coming out today,
Yeah.
what you are doing is exactly what they describe to do.
Yeah.
Which is to get strong and to keep your cardiovascular up.
Absolutely. Well, I've always sort of.
But you've known this you're a pioneer.
But
You've known this for years.
But when I go to these games, it's so exciting for me because, firstly, I didn't go. I missed out when I was younger.
Right.
But I'm enjoying it now more probably because people can't believe it. As I said, I passed the track at 30 seconds, and when I arrived at these World Games, they all thought I'd be a no-hoper. And
Wow, that's incredible.
how come you've come from 30 seconds down to whatever? So, you know, in the 60 metres even, I got a bronze medal, but there was only 0.4 of a second between first and third. And the next 7 were like a second behind.
Wow.
And and of course they're asking, and then I broke the indoor, and that was the Australian indoor record I broke in that, and the Australian indoor record I broke it in the 200 metres heat, mucked up the final because it's a difficult thing to run in the indoor, and this is what David Grace told me. it's on an erected platform, and you've got to go up and down,
Yeah.
and it's
Not flat.
twice round for 400 metres, 200 metres one.
Right.
And I made a mistake in the final. I took the outside. The lanes are also narrower. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But in the 400 metres final, I beat the current world champion, and he was Spanish. And
And do you come across these same people over and over as you do more of these races?
well, I haven't done that.
Okay.
This is really the only world one. This in the one I did
In Florida, you were saying in Gainesville.
That's really the only one I've competed in, and I won a silver and a bronze, which was pretty
Awesome.
good. The it's world competition, and
Yeah, that's what
they
I'm
come
thinking.
from everywhere.
Right.
So I was very, very pleased with that, considering also that I'm still. I think I've got a bit of improvement to get, but they couldn't believe that I've never run. That I haven't run a race competitively since I was a schoolboy. At Wesley, I was a good runner when I was a kid,
Right.
and I actually won a trophy 4 years running, 10, 11, 12, 13. They used to give a trophy for the best all-round athlete
Right.
based on running and jumping. And I won the trophy 4 years running. And after that, I didn't run. I just played tennis and I don't know. I just didn't. I wasn't that fast.
Right.
I mean, others grew, and I was okay. I was pretty good, but I wasn't the best. And I like to be the best.
Yes. No, the competitive drive, and I could see here it
So-
never leaves you, does it?
You know, and I was a good footballer, a pretty good footballer at school too. So I won the football prize when I was
Awesome.
13, and as did my brother, and interestingly enough. So we had a lot of similarities in our sport, but he was definitely the rugged, heavy,
Right.
weightlifting type. But the weightlifting, I think, has been a good thing for me, for my condition today.
And yeah, and also mentally, I'm just curious. And this is a digression here, but you've also had an incredibly successful business career at the same time, haven't you?
I've done all right.
Maybe tell us about Godfrey's.
Yeah, well, Godfrey's, how far? What must I tell you about Godfrey's? Godfrey started this in the Depression.
Right.
He came from, he was working in a business that was a third generation business
Already. Okay.
already.
Yeah.
And his grandfather had started it with his brothers back in, I think, the 1860, roundabout.
Right.
And where the Chinese Museum is today in Cohen Place or Cohen Alley?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's named after the family, that lane, and the Chinese Museum
Wow.
was their warehouse.
Okay.
So they talk about in the history. If you go to the Chinese Museum, they'll tell you that. But so when my father was working in his father had the Chapel Street store,
Right.
which I'm trying to think, is it near where Billy Guides or something is today? I'm not sure, but I know where it is if I drive there. But it was
I think there's a Dan Murphy's.
it was going downhill in the Depression,
Right.
and there was about, I don't know how many windows they had,
Right.
big frontage to Chapel Street. And my grandfather was not a great businessman. He was too nice a man. He used to smoke a pipe. I mean, I was very young when he passed away, but he was very generous. And in the Depression, people bought. It was a furniture. I haven't seen what it was. Furniture they sold. A lot of it was Chinese-made furniture from the Chinese that lived in or were along Little Burke Street. And Dad used to say he knew them all, and because he'd walk with his father, and it was quite a friendly sort of atmosphere. Anyway, Dad was working in one of, and he asked him. He could see he wasn't going to. He already met my mother.
Right.
Towards when he was in his early 20s, 21. He'd left school early because he wasn't keen on school. He did some short courses in polishing and stuff.
Just shows you there's a lot of ways to Rome, people. Yes.
What's that?
It just shows you there are a lot of pathways to success.
That's right. So anyway, one day he tried selling different things, sewing machines and what have you. Anyway, he asked his dad to go to an auction. He saw an auction in town, and he bought, I think, 20. He actually has the ad, which I put in my book, which 25 or 30 vacuum cleaners in various condition, and he bought the whole lot for about £25 or £26, which is probably was actually 5 weeks' wages. He was getting £5 a week at the time as a wage, and so I don't know how he put the money together.
Right.
But what he used to do is take them home, polish them, and fix them up if there was something, often there mightn't be much wrong sometimes.
Right.
The motor might need work. And father gave him one window, and I noticed, I've got his wage record at the time.
Wow.
And it actually dropped for a month.
Okay.
Whether it was paying for the window, I don't know. And every day he'd sell at least one. And you couldn't believe it. I mean, he was doing more business. The shop was going backwards, the business. Anyway, one day a woman came in. She said her husband worked for Hoover. He was a salesman. Anyway, the story was he eventually got the Hoover contract to take all their trade-ins, and then he got the Electrolux one. That's how it all started. And then he had a shop in Burke House on the corner of Burke and Russell Street, which the building was owned by my mother's father.
Okay.
My maternal grandfather, who was encouraging. He'd been encouraged by his parents, by his mother-in-law. So this was the family thing. He encouraged them, and Godfrey. There was a fellow upstairs, Radio Rentals. Have you heard of Radio Rentals?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, well, Radio Rentals were upstairs in the building, and there was a fellow called John Johnson who used to come down and watch Dad selling vacuum cleaners, and he said, I'd love to do this. And he came from a very poor family. And Dad, they used to have lunch together regularly. He was about 10 years younger than Dad. And eventually, Dad said to him, well, look, if you want to, when he got both contracts,
right.
He said, I'll give you, I was taken, when I was born in 1938.
Right.
The story is that our family went to Adelaide that year. I would have been 10 months old.
Right.
They told me I slept in the bathtub because the hotel didn't have enough, or the bedroom wasn't big enough for the 3 kids. And my father found a shop in the Adelaide Arcade, and John managed, I think his uncle lent him a ute. We've got a movie. My mother used to take movies, so a lot of this stuff is on movie, of John driving off with all these vacuum cleaners. I think the car broke down on the way. It was anyway. Eventually got it, and the rest is history. I mean, he was a brilliant. Everything was done on a handshake.
Wow.
And it grew to what you know. And
Incredible.
When Darryl and I moved out of the law in 1980s. We got involved with the business, and we said, it was building at that time,
right.
And my sister, my brother, and myself each put one child into to involve. Got a grant from mine, and Tom Cruelis from my brother, and
right.
and my sister had her son-in-law as well, and it just went gangbusters, and
what a great story.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So a pretty good overall business life. we have to keep it, and eventually we kind of have to come to an end here, Trevor. But before we do, we have something, a spinning wheel, where it's going to come up with you with a random question, just so you know I'm not cheating or anything like that. I just want you to see. I'm going to ask you a random question, which is your inspiration song. Is there any music that you play, especially before a race?
That I love?
Absolutely.
Are you saying, are you talking for inspiration or
Yes.
just...
Anything.
I love, so old-fashioned. I mean, I'm 87. What do you want from me? I love that scene from Hello, Dolly.
Okay.
Well, hello, Dolly. Do you know the film? Yeah.
Yes.
And I just, that is something about that, the way they respond, and then she says hello, and it's just a beautiful, it's just a favourite film, and
Right.
a favourite moment. Yeah.
Trevor, it's been so inspirational to just see you, to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.